Good morning, everybody. I'm a little bit disappointed that I have to come up on stage after we saw those dance moves. I don't know if I'm going to be able to follow it up. Oh, clicker. So as you guys know, we're going to talk to you about understanding real people. And I think for me, what we're going to talk to you about, me and Vivek, is something that I am super passionate about, which is our consumer connection system. We call it CCS, so if you hear me refer to CCS, that is what I'm referring to. And why it's so important for me as a media strategist is because my job is to understand real people. And CCS puts people at the decision at the center of our decision making from a strategy perspective. And that is why, our goal, our focus from a CCS perspective is to design for real people. Our consumer connection system is, for me, just one of the most robust data systems that I've come across in this industry. And the reason for that is because it covers such a range of data points, of insight, of topics that I really want to understand about real people. I think the first thing that it obviously looks at is demographics, and I'll talk to you a little bit about how robust those demographics are for us. But what it does that other systems, I think, don't do as well is it unpacks things like opinions and personality. So we've got over 180 data points in the survey, in the system, that looks at things like psychographics, lifestyle statements, opinions, interests, content preferences. And what it enables us to do is to take things like demographics and opinions and personality and start to overlay it with channel planning. And of course, being a media strategist, that is one of the most important things. But what it does is it doesn't just unpack things like media penetration and reach. It actually looks at things like noticeability, interest, intent, recognition, which are all things that we need to start moving towards, attention being paid. And then, of course, from a hobbies and activities perspective, we can understand, what they like to do on the weekends, what they like to do in their free time, what they like to watch, and how all of that influences their decision making. And the amazing thing about CCS is that not only does it have all of this data within it, but it is such a well-established method of understanding people. We have got almost complete global coverage of our consumer connection system. You can see here that it's across the Americas, EMEA, APAC, and just from an African continent perspective, we've got our survey in Egypt, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, and South Africa. Our oldest survey, I think, which I always am shocked by, is our UK survey, which actually started in 1998. Our South African survey, which is what we're here to talk to you about today, has almost a decade, or more than a decade, in fact, history in South Africa. We started with the first iteration back in 2011, and it was really a first-in-the-market solution to understanding media consumption, demographics, and branded data with a little bit of human behavior. We moved into 2014, which is when we launched our next update, and this was really around building out a deeper understanding. So how do we do, how do we take what we have and build a more robust understanding of consumers from a behavioral, psychographic, preference, interest perspective? What we then realized as we moved into 2017 was that, what we could start to overlay was a constantly shifting media landscape. Things were changing almost on a daily basis, and we needed to have a more in-depth understanding of media channels. As I said, things like attention being paid, interest, recognition, and that was really built into the 2017 data. And then 2020 happened, and unbelievably, thanks to Borderless Access, we were in market during an unprecedented time. And what it enabled was a data solution in a time when we shouldn't have had a data solution. And what that means is that we now sit with a data set from 2020 that is so impactful in terms of understanding how behavior, consumers and media shifted between a COVID-19 time and now. And then 2022, which is what we're going to discuss with you guys today, is about to be launched this week, and I'm so excited about it. I think it's evolutionary. It takes everything we know, and it just takes it to that new level. It takes new media channels, new behaviors, a deeper understanding of South Africa's youth, which I'm so excited about, and it just gives us that understanding of real people that we so desperately need at this time. And I've hinted to it, but for me, there are two standout advantages over and above the advantages that come with all of the data points that are in the survey, right? The one is that for me as a strategist across the African continent, and not just, in fact, the African continent, but working in a global group like Dentsu, the fact that this system is market comparable, there's a 70% overlap in similarity of all the CCS surveys in the world. And what it enables us to do is to not only benchmark South Africa in terms of more Western markets, but it enables us to understand the similarities and the nuances, across countries in our own continent. How is South Africa different to Nigeria, to Kenya, to Ghana, to Egypt, which is so important working across this region. The other really standout thing for me has been that, as I mentioned, we have this data set between 2020 and 2022 that we shouldn't really have. And it enables us to be able to trend that data of how consumer behavior, media behavior, their perception around brands and advertising and their attitudes has shifted from 2020 to 2022. And that's what we wanted to stop here and just talk a little bit about, because that solution and having those two data sets would not have been possible unless we did this survey through, collected this data online. And that's what I just want to hand over to Vivek to chat to you about, the complexity of doing that, but how amazing it is that it was able to be done.
Thanks, Megan. Morning, everyone. So, Dr. Falala mentioned in his opening statement yesterday that we all work for consumers, and that is what is at the core of the CCS study that we are talking about today. As Megan said, it helps put consumers at the center of all decision making, specifically from media industry's perspective. So I'll be talking more about how we transition this study to a digital methodology from offline methodology. And when we were asked to do that somewhere around 3 years back, the first question that came to our mind was, can we transition this study to online methodology from offline? Why I say that? Let us look at some of the reasons. So, as Megan was just mentioning, this study covers a lot of information areas about the consumers. It makes it is a lengthy survey. The length of interview for the survey is around 80 to 90 minutes. Along with that, it also covers a large and diverse sample. It is 5,000 sample across the demographics and geography of South Africa. And there was a limited scope of making any changes in the questionnaires for this study. As again Megan mentioned, this is a global standardized survey, which means we cannot make a lot of changes to make this survey more online friendly. So how did we transition this study to digital methodology with all these challenges in front of us? Let's look at that in upcoming slides. So the base of this study, the product on which this was built on, was Borderless Access online panels. This is a online community, a large, mature, and highly engaged online community, which has more than 300,000 community members who are spread across all the demographics of South Africa. This is a very mature community, which we established in 2011, so almost an 11-year-old community now. And as we said, we have carefully spread it across, if you look at this map, spread across South Africa, so not only covering metros, but also cities, towns, and to some extent rural areas of the country as well. Now, once we have this community, which is spread across, it is also very important to have the right engagement with your community members. There have to be a sense of belongingness and a sense of serving larger purpose rather than just being there to take surveys for incentives. And how do we do that? We do that by continuously engaging with our community members, whether it is through emails, community updates on emails, through social media, engaging with them daily on social media, or through the multiple devices, including notifications on their smart devices, as well as through incentivization schemes. So the idea is basically to build a connected and committed community, which is there when asked for the opinions. Here is an example of one of the social media posts from the community members who feel that this community gives them a platform to make their voice heard in the society. Now, even with a highly engaged community, we need to ensure that we are reaching out to them in a manner which is not intrusive or disruptive. So in order to achieve that, what we do is we use a lot of past behavioral data of our community members. We use machine learning to understand at what time of the week and what time of the day they generally take these surveys. And not only that, but also which device do they generally prefer to take surveys. And we use that data then to precisely target them at that day of the week or that hour of the day to get the best response rates from them. Now, we started with this question when we were asked to transition this study to digital methodology, that can we transition this study? And then the answer is that it's not recommended to have such a lengthy survey online. And initially we were thinking about splitting it into multiple surveys, but that was not possible because this being globalized study. But answer is it is not impossible to transition these kind of study to digital methodology if you can build a customized program keeping a unique requirement in mind. So some of the learnings that we had on the way while transitioning the study. And yesterday, during one of the presentations, we were talking about always ask your customers to understand whether our ad is working or not, right? So we went to our community members and asked them, will they be willing to take such a survey, keeping in mind that there will be flexibility of taking the survey over multiple sittings rather than completing it in one go, and also for appropriate incentives. We also tested the study. So before going live on field, we ran a pilot with a small set, and we understood the response and kind of implemented some corrective steps as well before finally taking it live on field. Some of the benefits that we saw from the transition, we got to tap into the consumer minds directly without any human intervention. That is basically avoiding any interviewer bias, any possible interviewer bias. We were also able to turn around the study very quickly. It was around 60 to 65% of time that offline study used to take. We also got to access difficult to reach audiences. For example, audiences who live in gated communities, and more so during COVID when reaching out to them in person was not possible. And all this while passing on some cost benefits to our clients. So I'll now hand over to Megan to talk about the key insights from the study.
So, as Vivek said, it wasn't impossible, but it was a challenge. And with a challenge, I feel like I want to just spend a little bit of time bragging about the kind of data that we now have access to. As I said, I get very excited about this, and I think that our CCS is just so rich. And I'll show you a few slides today in terms of what we can pull out of the data, but it's really just scratching the surface of the amount of data points that we have available. Like Vivek said, it's an 80 to 90 minute survey, so it's robust. And for me, one of the sort of the key things, and although the demographics might seem like the most boring part of it, I think for me to sit now with a study that covers over 29 million South Africans is, almost mind-blowing, using a sample size of over 5,000. And I think, it's just testament to the fact that our 2020 study was looking at an audience size of about 27 million, and we're now sitting on over 29 million. And it just shows how many more people are moving online and how more the data is going to be collectible online. Other things that we noticed, and I'll show you a little bit later on in the deck as well, is that having people complete the data or the survey in their own time, in their own homes, in places that they feel comfortable, without the intensity of somebody asking them the questions, really enabled us to start to get, I think, more authentic answers. We noticed with data points like income, with gender preferences, that we were getting more robust answers from consumers, which as media strategists is so important that we truly understand what is going on. Another thing that I'll talk about a little bit later down is just that amount that looks small, but that 2% that's sitting under 18. And that for us is so key as we go into media planning, in 2023 and beyond. Being a media strategist, obviously, this is one of my favorite slides in terms of being able to understand how penetration across media channels has changed and shifted. And, it's so interesting to see those significant changes just from a 2020 to a 2022 perspective. And remember, we've got this data all the way back from 2011. And I think it just reinforced how we understood consumers to behave over the 2020 to 2022 period. We saw things like, interestingly, actually, a slight reduction in internet consumption, in social media consumption from 2020 to 2022 as people moved back to more normal daily life. We saw the revival of out of home, which I'm so happy about. We saw print and newspapers and magazines start to shift slightly into the positive. And we saw things growing exponentially, like video on demand and online video. And as I said, it's not just that we can look at. It's things like, how much attention do you pay when you're watching different channels or consuming different channels? And how can we start to infuse that with our media understanding and how we plan? Reach, although the most important metric, has to be taken into account with a level of recognition or noticeability or attention. And this is what it enables us to do. Two things that just really stood out for me that I was quite shocked by was that 45% of that 29 million are now checking TikTok at least once a day, which is, such an amazing data point when you think of when I checked, if I pull that stat out purely for that Gen Z audience, it's only sitting at, I think, 55%, right? So our total audience is shifting to channels like TikTok. Instagram, which has been around for over a decade, is only sitting on 46% of total audience that check it at least once a day, right? And then another really interesting point, which is something that we've been thinking and knowing from a behavioral perspective, but have now actually got a data point to identify it, is that weekly gaming activity, and this is gaming across mobile or console, has increased by 23%. I think it shifted from 46% weekly penetration during COVID to 69% weekly penetration in 2022, which is an amazing jump. And then, like I said, one of the things that I love about our CCS survey is the fact that we can now overlay this demographic and media consumption data with data points that no other survey that I've come across in the industry has, right? And that is the deeper understanding of real people. And again, like, these are just some of the things that I pulled through that I thought were interesting, but there are hundreds of lifestyle statements, psychographics, interest points that enable me as a media strategist to start to unpack things like, yes, we can choose a specific media channel, but how should we talk to that audience on that channel? What is important to come through from a content perspective? How do I choose influencers that talk to the ambitions, the worries, the aspirations of my audience? And how do I start to impact things like creative decisions through that as well? How do I give my client a better understanding of who they're speaking to? And then, like I said, for me, gone are the days of having to bootleg a Walk article on Gen Zs, which I'm not proud to admit I've tried to do. We now have access to 15 to 24-year-olds, which if any of you deal with clients on a daily basis, you know is such an important topic of conversation. And I'm now sitting with an audience size of over 6 million to be able to understand this audience. And you know, one of the interesting things that came out, again, like I said, with the income, we're starting to see this shift towards more honest answers when we talk about things like gender preferences and sexuality. It's still very small, but when I look at things, for example, like, identifying as non-binary or transgender within the Gen Z audience, it's almost 3 times as big as we see with the total population. And it just gives us a better understanding of how to craft better media, better communication, and better advertising. And it also tells us other things about our audience. Things like 42% of Gen Zs want to start their own business. You know, I work for a bank, I won't say what bank, but that is an important data set to understand in terms of how we can start to craft communication around looking at their desires and their aspirations. I think on that point though, and I'll end here because I don't want to give away all my data, but you know, I love this quote from Bob Hoffman. If you don't follow Bob Hoffman, he's a, if you're easily offended, maybe don't look into his writing. But he says, it comes down to human intelligence and creativity, not the amount of data that you have. The human element is the differentiator. And I think, you know, working at Cara, working as the media strategist, that is the most important thing that I can take from this data, is that there are, I think, 20,000 data points in that CCS survey, but it is our ability to unpack and understand that data that makes it impactful, that makes it useful. And that is what I get to do on a daily basis, and that is why I'm so excited about this data. So thank you.